An electromagnetic lock is essentially an electromagnet in a housing that is mounted on the door frame and a steel armature mounted on the door. When the magnet is energized, it bonds to the armature and locks the door. To allow access or egress, a switch must be provided to de-energize the magnet. There are two sets of requirements included in the model codes that are typically applied to electromagnetic locks. These sections address two different applications, so for each maglock installation, one set of requirements must be followed, not both. The two applications addressed by the model codes are Option A, an electromagnetic lock released by a sensor that detects an occupant approaching the door and unlocks the door, or Option B, an electromagnetic lock released by door-mounted hardware that incorporates a switch to immediately release the lock for egress. When discussing these applications, the words electromagnetic lock, electrically locked, and electrified lock may be used, but the important thing to remember is that these code sections apply to electrified locks that are unlocked by a sensor or by a switch in door-mounted hardware. The most common type of lock used in these installations is an electromagnetic lock. The titles of the model code sections that apply to electrified locks unlocked by a sensor vary depending on the code and edition. In the International Building Code, the section is now called Sensor Release of Electrically Locked Egress Doors. Prior to the 2015 edition of the IBC, this section was called Access Controlled Egress Doors. The title was changed to avoid confusion about whether this section was intended to apply to all doors with access control readers. That was not the intent. In NFPA 101, the title of the section addressing maglocks released by a sensor was called Access Controlled Egress Door Assemblies through the 2015 edition. In the 2018 edition, the title was changed to Sensor Release of Electrical Locking Systems. The model code sections that apply to electrified locks unlocked by a switch in the door-mounted hardware are as follows. In the 2009 through 2015 editions of the IBC, the section is called Electromagnetically Locked Egress Doors. Beginning with the 2018 edition of the IBC, this section is called Door Hardware Release of Electrically Locked Egress Doors, to be more consistent with the Sensor Release section title. In NFPA 101, the Life Safety Code, the section that applies to maglocks released by a switch in door-mounted hardware was called Electrically Controlled Egress Door Assemblies in the 2009 through 2015 editions. Beginning with the 2018 edition of the NFPA 101, this section is called Door Hardware Release of Electrically Locked Egress Door Assemblies. According to the IBC and NFPA 101, an electrified lock released by a sensor mounted on the egress side to detect an approaching occupant must also be unlocked in the direction of egress by the following: loss of power to the sensor, loss of power to the lock or locking system, activation of the building fire alarm or automatic sprinkler system where provided, and the door must remain unlocked until the fire protection system has been reset, a manual unlocking device, typically a push button, that is located 40 to 48 inches above the floor and within 5 feet of the door. Ready access must be provided to the push button, and the button must be marked Push to Exit. Pushing the button must directly interrupt power to the lock, independent of the other electronics, and the door must remain unlocked for at least 30 seconds. The model codes include the following requirements for an electrified lock released by door-mounted hardware that incorporates a built-in switch. The hardware mounted on the door must have an obvious method of operation and must be readily operated with one hand and under all lighting conditions. Operation of the hardware must directly interrupt the power to the lock, and the door must unlock immediately. The door must also unlock upon loss of power to the locking system. If panic hardware is required, operation of the panic hardware or fire exit hardware must release the lock. Note that this section does not require the door to unlock upon activation of the fire protection system. Both of these types of electrified locks, those released by a sensor and those released by a switch in the door-mounted hardware, must be allowed by the use group or occupancy classification. They are not allowed in every type of building. Refer to the applicable code for the list of occupancy types where these locks are acceptable, along with specific requirements regarding emergency lighting and the activation of manual fire alarm boxes. Some editions of the model codes also require the door locking system units to be listed in accordance with UL 294, Standard for Access Control System Units. There has been a lot of confusion about where and when to apply these code sections. Note that they only apply to electrified locks released by a sensor and electrified locks released by a switch in the door-mounted hardware. Electromechanical locks that allow free and immediate egress by turning a lever or pushing the touchpad of the panic hardware are not required to comply with these two model code sections. There are additional sections that apply to delayed egress locks, controlled egress locks in healthcare facilities, stairwell reentry, and fail-safe locks on elevator lobby doors. States and local jurisdictions may modify the model codes, so it's important to check the codes that have been adopted in a project's location to verify whether these requirements apply. The authority having jurisdiction, the AHJ, can be consulted for more information. For detailed information about egress requirements for door openings, refer to the applicable code requirements or download the Allegion Code Reference Guide at idighardware.com/guide. To watch more videos, visit our training page at www.allegion.com/us.